I know you're saying 60 grams of protein in the morning. Like, what does that look like? What kind of, like, what food would that look like? Would you eat like eggs, cottage cheese, nuts, peanut butter toast? Like, how do you get 60 calories in the morning? What would that look like? And like, how much does a person need a day? That's
Yeah.
two
So
questions.
I'd say, whoa. I'd say, so you don't have to get 60 grams. This was just from one particular study. 60 grams of protein is quite a bit in one meal. Now, you're going to want to get at least 25, 30 grams in one meal. And this is another important point. If you're taking in small, snackable protein snacks throughout the day that are like 15 less grams of protein, your liver's breaking down a bunch of those, or your gut's breaking down that protein, and your liver is hogging most of that amino acid. Remember, that's that first pass metabolism. About 50% of the protein you take in, your liver is going to need to utilize and provide to other organs as well. So your muscle is really not getting, or so not a lot of amino acids then make it into circulation. And your muscle needs a certain amount. Turns out right around that 25, 30 grams is a very good amount to make sure you have enough circulating amino acids to stimulate protein synthesis. So when you're taking these small protein snacks spread out throughout the day, sure, you can add up to a similar protein quantity, but you're not getting that added stimulated muscle protein synthesis. And so for breakfast, you don't need 60 grams of protein when you wake up, but you do want to make sure you're getting that 25 to 30.
25 to 30. Wow, I did not know that. That's crazy because I
Yeah.
usually take little tiny snacks of protein throughout the day and then have those lunch and dinner a little bigger protein. But that makes sense. How do the insulin levels look in the morning when you eat protein compared to like, say, you eat like a bagel or something?
So with insulin levels, insulin's super sensitive to glucose. So when you take in carbohydrates, that gets converted into glucose in the bloodstream, insulin's going to skyrocket. That doesn't happen with protein. And what's interesting is there's Don Lehman's group did a couple different papers where they tried to substitute protein for carbohydrates in people's diets. So they had a high carb, low protein, and then a low carb, high protein. I always mess those up, but I try to explain them, so I had to like take my time there. And they did these in a couple different models, and they showed that when you drop carbohydrates and increase protein intake, insulin responses are suppressed, glycemic regulation is improved, so blood glucose levels, triglycerides are improved. They also lose more fat and maintain more muscle mass. So on this is an interesting point that doesn't really get at your question, but it's about weight loss with protein, because this points to this super cool area of research that, in a matched calorie intake diet here, people that had more protein and less carbohydrates here, and I'm not bashing on carbohydrates. I want to make that a point. I'm not trying to say drop.
What type of carbohydrates are you talking?
So carbohydrates come from, like your
Vegetables.
pastas and, well, like bread, pasta,
So you're talking like
sugars,
starchy,
cookies,
starchy
any
carbs?
carbohydrate.
Any carb.
Any carbohydrate. So if you have carbohydrates, they're going to get broken into glucose, whatever way you spin it. Now, what they did in these studies and the outcomes that they found were super cool. They had these, matched calorie intake groups that just had higher protein and lower carbs versus the lower protein, higher carb group. And they lost more weight. Now, that's when you think of it in terms of this energy in, energy out model. How do you lose more weight when you're taking in the same amount of calories? And it turns out because protein has a very high thermic effect. So you get this thermic effect of food in terms of like it, when you take in protein, your body actually has to utilize more energy to digest, break it down. So it raises your metabolic rate slightly. And they found that just increasing protein intake had about 170 calorie per day effect on these individuals that resulted in this drop in body fat and then increase in lean body mass because you're taking in protein. And they also felt more full. So the surveys they did, they didn't do a very good job of actually assessing satiety here. But based on the data that they do have, the people with on the high carbohydrate tended to, vocalize their feeling of hunger and dissatisfaction, and versus the high protein and like that satiety effect. And this has been shown with protein resulting in a higher satiety effect. When you take in higher amounts of protein, you're going to feel more full. So now you have this increased protein resulting in greater weight loss, and not just weight, but body fat specifically, because you've got protein, you're not going to lose that lean body mass like you would see if you're just, straight up restricting calories, but not focusing on protein.